I wanted to show a game I just played in the London system that I feel really shows why the London system is an excellent choice for adult improvers. The main reason being that it is very easy to play if you know some general ideas. And I think this game, it was actually a 3-minute blitz game. And normally you wouldn't want to try to, analyze in depth, spend a lot of time on blitz games perhaps. But I think this game kind of shows how just understanding some of the ideas of the London system can go a long ways, especially for an adult improver. Because if the person you're playing doesn't play optimally against the London system, you can go a long ways by just understanding some ideas. And I think quite a number of those ideas actually were used in this game, and you can kind of see how these ideas play out. And so I want to go through the opening here and kind of explain some ideas as they come up, and then we'll look at it. White ends up getting a blistering attack in this game, but if we can understand why that happened, how do we get that attack? What did Black do wrong that let us get this attack? I think that goes a long ways in the London. So let's start going through the game here. Like I said, it was just a 3-minute blitz game, but my computer rating was actually pretty high, so I think it's still worth looking at. Now, first thing to note is that when Black plays e6, they lock in their light squared bishop. And normally what that tells us is usually when they do this, they're probably a Queen's Indian player or Nimzo Indian player, and usually they're going to end up playing b6 and developing their light squared bishop. Instead of developing it along this diagonal and trying to get it out to f5, they're probably going to try to develop it along this c8 to a6 diagonal. So that's just the first thing to kind of mentally note as you're playing. We just continue with our development, our standard development. Generally we meet c5 with e3. And we play the two knights tabia. I do have some videos, I'll put a link to them here on top, about the reason that we develop these two knights before we develop this bishop. We'll actually play these two knights, form our pawn triangle before we play this bishop. And I got some videos that kind of make clear why that reason is, so I'm not going to cover that, but just note that we're playing the two knights tabia here. And so now we kind of have, we're at this point, we kind of got our tabia set up and we can play our bishop out to d3 generally without getting into much trouble at this point. Now, in this position, Black played bishop to d6. And so there's kind of a general rule in the London system. If they play bishop to d6 and they have already played c5, then generally we want to move our bishop back to g3. And that's what happens in this game, and so we'll discuss that a lot. But let's say we just went along with our standard development. This pawn structure here is something that is playable in the London system, but we end up basically playing g3 and we clamp down on this e5 square. It tends to be more effective when Black hasn't played c5 already, putting pressure on our d4 square, because you can imagine in this position something like this could be a bit annoying where they're hitting both b2 and d4. But imagine if they didn't have that pawn on c5, then this could be a quite good option actually, and I just thought I would bring that up. But generally, if they've played c5 and then they play bishop to d6, we drop back to g3. And the idea is if they capture on g3, we're going to capture towards the center, and that's going to open up our rook. And that rook can be quite annoying if black castles into that. So in this position, black castled in the game. We continue on, and now we have, like, this is our standard London system setup. We got our triangle set up. We developed the 2 knights before we developed our light squared bishop, and then we got our bishop to d3. So this is like what we're trying to do in the London system. And now my opponent plays bishop takes g3. And so, as I mentioned before, we're going to capture towards the center. Just in general, usually you want to capture towards the center with your pawns, unless you have a good reason not to. And now we notice, look at how our bishop and rook converge on h7, which is traditionally a weak spot in black's camp. So one other thing to notice, okay, he's castled, so he can't do anything. He can't castle queenside at this point because he's already castled kingside. So we know where his king is. And another thing to point out is because he didn't get this bishop outside of this pawn chain, he can't use this bishop in the defense of this king very easily now. You can imagine if that bishop was on f5, if he had gotten that outside of the pawn chain, well, this dangerous bishop on this b1 to h7 diagonal would be blunted, but that's not the case here. This bishop is bearing down on his king. And so just kind of note those, like, this is how the London can get pretty ferocious pretty quickly if black doesn't really understand these kind of general concepts of the London system. And you can see we haven't done anything special. We knew to drop our bishop back. We did our standard development out of the 2 knights tabia, knew to drop our bishop back to g3, and we're just kind of aware of certain things, like he's played e6, he's got his light squared bishop blocked in, he hasn't fianchettoed to try to develop it, alternatively along that a6 to c8 diagonal. So our antenna goes up a little bit. It's not like we're absolutely winning, but it kind of shows us that maybe if there's any further missteps by black, we might have something going on quite quickly. Now, in this position in the game, he played c takes d here. And this is another general rule of the London, and that's why I think this game is pretty good to point a lot of these things out. The general rule is that we want to take back with the e-pawn. If they do c takes d, we want to take back with the e-pawn, and then we get this pawn structure, which is known as the Carlsbad pawn structure, where we have the semi-open e-file, and they have the semi-open c-file. And just note that generally, in this Carlsbad structure, black, if they're the ones with the open C file, now you can have this too where white's the one with the open C file and black's the one with the open D file. But in this particular case, the side with the open C file, they generally want to attack on the queen side. And the side with the open E file, semi-open E file, wants to attack on the king side. You know, there's some more complexities in that, but that's just kind of like a general thing. And how that usually unfolds for black in this position is they'll play moves like a6, b5, and the idea is they're going to play b5 to b4, and they're going to try to make this c-pawn weak. You can imagine they capture this, we capture back, and we got this backward c-pawn. And they'll do that in combination of things with like knight to a5 to c4. So long story short, this would be something. If you play the London system, you might want to find some videos online talking about this Carlsbad structure. And this is called the minority attack. You have less pawns, it's the minority, and you're using that minority to try to damage white's queenside pawn majority. So those might be some good videos to search for. And maybe if I find some, I'll put a link to them in the show notes. But, you know, white will often play a3 to try to slow that down a little bit. But the main idea is like white is going to be attacking on the king side. Black is going to be trying to create counterplay on the queen side. And they want to tie us down by doing that. And so in the game, black had a bit of a misstep, in my opinion. he played rook to e8. And now, generally, you know, we're going to be the ones trying to attack here. f7 can be a soft point in Black's defense. But I think Black probably should have tried to create, played on the queen side, either doing this minority attack straight away, coming out and combining that maybe with attacking their b2 pawn. They need to try to create some kind of play quickly on the queen side. And so normally when Black plays rook to e8, what they are trying to do is they're trying to threaten the move e5. And generally as White, a common response for us that usually works, and you got to make sure you look at it in a specific situation, is that we do not generally, now here I think it's a different story, but in a lot of times in these kind of main lines of the London system, you do not want to let Black easily get in e5 because then they've pretty much equalized. One thing you'll notice when you play the London system and as you watch games in the London system and analyze games, this e5 square is critical. It's kind of a key square in the London system because, a lot of times we'll have a bishop on this diagonal protecting that e5 square, and we can use this e5 square as like a base of operations to launch attacks from. Sometimes, we'll be posting knights out there, backing it up with a pawn on f4, and if they ever capture, we can take back with f4, and then we've also, once we get a pawn on e5, it takes away the f6 square for defensive pieces. So this e5 square is critical. We do not want to let them wrestle control of that square. So in the game, I played knight to e5. So that's just one thing to note. And I don't think here it would have been as strong necessarily for Black because they'd be left with this isolated pawn, and to get that they'd have to trade off another knight, and they'd be left in this isolated pawn position where two of the minor pieces are already traded off. Kind of a general rule, and it always depends on the specific situation, but if you're the side with the isolated pawn, you would like to have at least 3 of those minor pieces on the board because you're going to have to use that space advantage from that isolated pawn to try to launch attacks from. And when you've already got a couple of these minor pieces off the board, that makes it more difficult. So I don't think it would actually be that scary if they got e5 in anyway, but we want to secure that and use that as a launching pad for our attack. So a lot of kind of general principles of the London coming up here, and just kind of notice these small deviations from Black, and he quickly gets in this position where it's just a really rough position for him. So he played g6. He's worried about this h7 square. Now I played queen to f3, and just I wanted to point out the fact to him that now f7 is a bit tender. So we got the knight and the queen converging on this, and it also ties down his queen, at least momentarily, to the protection of this knight on f6, because this pawn, every time a move is made, there's consequences to the move, and the consequence of g6 is that pawn is no longer protecting that knight on f6. So this queen to f3 move is kind of annoying for Black. Now Black kind of I don't know, he played knight takes knight, and that's actually good for us because now we get this pawn. We generally love recapturing on e5 with our pawn because now this pawn controls f6. Now this knight was a good defender, right? It's defending this critical h7 square. Well, now he can't post anything up on f6 unless he gets rid of that pawn. And so that's just like, we just got a good position now. And so here we have to defend that. So I played queen to e3. But just kind of look at this. This is kind of like a dream position for us. Because he committed to castling so early, after he allowed us to have this open rook file, we kind of knew not to castle and kind of waited to see how things developed and just kind of look. I mean, like, we got everything kind of barreling down on him here, and this knight can come on into the action, and we create this local superiority of pieces on the king side, and he can't easily mobilize a defense. This e6 pawn, you know, keeps this bishop out of it. He's already moved his rook away from the defense of f7. So there's a lot of things working in our favor here. Now he played knight to f8. And this is what I think is kind of pretty picture for us as white. Like, look at all of black's pieces are on this first rank. Every single one of his pieces are on the first rank. Meanwhile, all of our pieces are ready to roll, other than this rook. And as soon as we castle queenside, this rook is ready to rumble too, and we can get activity down the H file. So this is just like, this is what we dream of as London players. And the beauty is like, I haven't done anything that I've had to think about at all. I haven't had to calculate anything. I haven't had to like really try to rack my brain to figure anything out. Just played standard moves with the general understanding of kind of like the thematic plans in the London system and just kind of the key ideas. And we ended up in this beautiful position. So obviously this is not going to end well for black here. I ended up playing f4. It's not the best move. You know, we blocked this diagonal in. You know, it's a blitz game. It's not terrible, but it's not ideal. I think I should have just played queenside castle, kept this diagonal open for the queen, and just start rumbling down the H file. That would have been pretty strong. But as it is, I think like if you're black in this position and you kind of see all your pieces on the first rank, no good way to quickly mobilize a defense. It's kind of you know, kind of concerning. So he actually plays f6, and so now it's kind of like Swiss cheese, right? I mean, like, now there's just like more holes in his position, and I just tried to bring more pieces kind of over into there, and we get into this position here. So still good for us. Now in this position, I thought this was a good move by black. He's hitting b2 and offering a queen trade. Now obviously the last thing we want to do when we have an attack going and we have better development is to trade off pieces, especially the queen. We want to keep all the dynamic potential alive. So I just simply drop back to d2 with the queen, covering b2 and still keeping it on this diagonal where it can go to h6. But so now his queen is over there and it can't really, it's going to take another move to aid in the defense of the king. So I decided to go queenside castle here. Let the king do the duty of covering b2. He wants to trade pieces again. No, thank you. We want to keep pieces on the board. We got the attack. Maybe not the most effective way of doing it, but it's good enough, especially in a blitz game. And then now this is where black makes the critical mistake. I mean, this is a dire situation over here on the king side. And he played a5, you know, trying to treat it like a race position. Unfortunately, we're going to get there so much quicker. We're already actually there. He needed to defend this 7th rank somehow, some way. So now I don't know if you want to pause the video. There's probably multiple ways to win this, but in this blitz game, what did I spend? I spent 2 seconds, I guess, on this move. And pretty much anything wins here. Actually, I think the computer preferred this, but I saw kind of what happened in the game. I saw this, and this is just brutal because, I mean, what does he do? I can just check him here. He can't come back here. If I can create space between his king, eliminate the defender. His king is the defender of the queen, which is kind of funny. So let him win this exchange, because after this it's over, and he actually resigned here. So I thought it was a really fun game actually, and I think it's a good example of why I think this London is a good thing to play for adult improvers, because there's a lot less memorization involved than there is in a lot of other openings, and we can play a lot based on understanding. Because like this game here, I didn't really have to. I mean, even like this bishop takes knight on the knight takes h7. I didn't really have to think about. I mean, we just got so much stuff lined up down there. It's not like I calculated anything out. I just knew it was good, and then I saw kind of this thematic idea. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of ideas there. I mean, I guess I could go back and point out a couple of the main ones real quickly. One of them is that on bishop d6, if they've played c5, we just simply drop back to g4. And if they take, like that, we take back with the h-pawn, unleashing the power of the rook on the h-file. And we can kind of wait and delay castling a little bit to see if they castle on the king side. And if they do, we may want to then consider castling on the queen side, or just delaying a bit and see how they develop. See if they play optimally or not. And if they don't, if they stray a bit, then we may want to castle queen side and just kind of just go at them. Another common principle in the London system: when they take with the c pawn, generally we capture with the e pawn. When they do c takes d, we do e takes d, and then we get this minority Carlsbad structure, and that may be worth looking some videos, because you will get that a lot. And then also, if you played the Scandinavian, you can get that in the Scandinavian, where you kind of have the black side of this. So it's a good structure to know. So maybe I'll try to see if I know of a couple good ones, I think, and maybe I'll try to put links to those when I get time down in the thing. And then the other thing to know is when they play rook to e8, you generally want to let them break with e5. Now this specific example wouldn't be the worst thing, but there are ones where if they play e5, they've just basically equalized, and it's not like it's terrible for us. It's just that we're not going to get an advantage, and we're not going to have our typical attacking themes. So the thing to know is generally it's good to consider playing knight to e5, and we use this e5 square as a base of operations. And I guess the final thing to just kind of say is that when they take with the knight, we kind of love that. We love getting our pawn on e5, because it takes away this f6 as a defensive square for black, which can put problems with h7, or just generally, in the area of the king. They can't have a knight or any piece on that square until they get rid of that pawn, which is not easy. So I hope you learned something from that. I really had fun playing that game, obviously. I liked seeing all of his pieces pushed back on the first rank, and having this just kind of easy attack that I could just kind of mindlessly play without having to strain my brain much at all. So I think the London system is awesome. I think it can be quite ferocious when people take it lightly and don't understand the importance of that e5 square. Don't understand that they shouldn't be opening up that h-file if they're going to castle kingside right away, especially if they don't have use of their light squared bishop because they've played e6. So anyway, Have a good one. Hope you found that fun. Take care.